race fans, this edition of Through the Gears presented by Front Stretch. I'm your host, Tino Patino, and I can't wait to get back into the NASCAR betting, racing, and playoff action at one of the best tracks and that had one of the best races in NASCAR history and the closest finish in NASCAR history. That's right, we're going to Kansas Speedway this weekend, and I'm super excited because this has been a great track for me betting-wise and also just entertainment-wise. And before we go into everything in this one, I gotta give a special shout-out to the people who commented on the last video. Shout-out to Mint Zin and shout-out to Kai Fried. If you guys want to be shouted out in the next episode, all you have to do is leave a comment down below, and I'll be sure to do so there. Really appreciate any and all comments, so keep them coming as we continue on this NASCAR playoffs run. So I think it's about time we get going with the special guest. So without further ado, let's go through the gears. Joining us now as we go through the gears is the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only Wyatt Watson. Wyatt, thanks for coming back onto the program. The best reoccurring guest that we've had on Through the Gears here this season. And Wyatt, how you been? How you doing? And what's new with you in the racing world so far?
Well, nothing official yet. I have some breaking news to say once that becomes official, but I got a lot of fun stuff coming in 2025. And yeah, man, I'm just chugging along through these playoffs, and we're coming to one of the best races that I have circled on my calendar. It's the Kansas playoff race. It's going to be fun. That track, I mean, obviously, last time we were there, closest finish in NASCAR history. How can you not be excited coming back to this? Probably the best mile and a half on the circuit. Glad to be on the show with you today and ready to make some money once again.
Yes, sir. And I'm glad you mentioned Kansas being such a great race that it was earlier this season, because that just makes things even more exciting as we head here, not only for the playoffs, but for some betting action as well. But before we get into Kansas, we got to look back at Bristol. It's time for the Bristol night race recap. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on Kyle Larson's dominating performance, leading as many laps as he did, the most in Hendrick Motorsports history for a single race. To me, I can always appreciate when a driver dominates like that, although it may not be the most exciting thing that we, could see. I thought there was still a good bit of playoff drama happening throughout the field. Whether it was Daniel Suarez battling, he was 3 laps down at one point, trying to maintain, his advantage over the bubble there and everything like that. I know from a betting standpoint, I did have Kyle Larson, so I was happy to be on the winning edge and the winning way of a Kyle Larson domination victory. But why, overall, your thoughts about the race last weekend?
First of all, how about round of applause? No overtime, and for the first time in forever. So I would have hated to see 462 and then some if there was overtime, laps led, and no win for Kyle Larson. That would have just been gut-wrenching defeat, kind of like how Truex lost in Richmond earlier this year. So so you hate to see those. So glad to see that happen for Kyle Larson. Third most dominant race in Bristol history. Go back to 1977. Sportsbooks, what was that back then? Like Cale Yarborough, legend of the sport, way back in the day. That's just a historic performance, which you don't see in today's NASCAR that much. So that's the things to look forward to. But in terms of just the racing, it was just. I will say this: the only good part of that race in terms of racing was the 3-wide battle between the bubble drivers. I think it was Chase Briscoe, Denny Hamlin, and not Ty Gibbs. It might have been Ty Gibbs. Can't remember who the third one was, but the top 5 battle nonetheless. Oh, Truex. It was Truex.
Yeah.
Top 5
before he had his trouble there too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Truex looked really good too. Maybe if you had top 5 numbers on him, should have been out of the park for him. I think he had a good line going into that race. Not quite sure what it looked like. Just again, because honestly, who cares about the line when Kyle Larson was that far ahead? But the top 3, top 5 line looked like a surefire thing until that penalty. And the penalties, I mean, again, those rocked those guys that got in the back. So if you had a Ty Gibbs, if you had a Martin Truex Jr., your day was done because, again, you just really couldn't make way and make good passes. It took Ty Gibbs.
I want to ask you about that, though. Yeah. Is that because of the tires? Because at the last Bristol race we saw the tremendous tire fall off. It was one of the most exciting things because of that fact, and we expected that heading into Bristol last weekend, and it just obviously was not the case. So is it the car that may be the issue in terms of passing, or would it be the tire that everyone was kind of, because I feel like the consensus around social media, or at least in the NASCAR garage now, is, oh, we need more passing to make, these short track races more exciting, to be able to keep promoting them, going back to them. Short track racing is, the bread and butter of NASCAR. What do you think they need to do to sort of elevate the racing in terms of passing and everything like that right now?
Yes. No, I'm just kidding. But I've been a big proponent against the short track style racing that the car, may I say this again, the car produces. It hasn't been good. It's needed a bailout from Goodyear. It got the bailout. This is why I got the bailout in the spring. It was colder in the spring. Now, if you look at that, and that's where the tire wasn't sticking, the rubber wasn't sticking to the concrete, and it was shaving out the tire in 50 laps. Well, when you come back and it's 80 degrees, the tires are gonna stick, and you have also three other series there at that point instead of two. You're gonna have the rubber get on the track. Another example is Concrete Dover, when they had practice and qualifying, and you saw the shavings practice and qualifying, but come race day, it warmed up. You saw the rubber get on that track, and racing was kind of Dover as we're used to with these cars. So I'm not surprised. I mean, that's what this tire did in Dover, and that's what we saw. So we just saw it here when it was more humid. After considerable thought, again, I blame the car more than the tire. It should not be Goodyear's job to come in and try to bail out NASCAR for their fault of making a car that cannot race on a short track. And props to Goodyear when they do. They did it in the spring. Yeah. They probably didn't know how to do it. Now, with the data they have with the warmer weather, I think there's a pathway to getting to that happy medium somewhere in between, to where there is considerable tire fall off, not quite the spring like everyone's freaking out about. Obviously, Kyle Larson's Twitter, he's been very vocal about that, and I have to agree with Kyle. I have to disagree at the same time. So,
well, I think rightfully so, with him not necessarily defending his win, but saying to the people, look, like, this can't be, like you said, all on Goodyear, especially moving forward when, Goodyear has done everything they've, could in order to help the racing product. Meanwhile, we've seen the car on all short tracks, or at least most of them thus far, have trouble. So it's not necessarily, I would say, Goodyear's fault. Like you said, also, I like the way you put that, because I think it's more so the car, or at least my opinion, it's more so the car than the tires. And I feel like you can take bigger swings at making things better or worse from the car standpoint rather than the tire, because I mean, when you're driving a vehicle and everything like that comes with it, it takes up more power rather than the tires that are falling off or not throughout the race.
Yeah, put 900 horsepower back in the car, make the tire base smaller, change the transmission. Those are the three things the NASCAR can do. It's just going to be way too much money to try to make those drastic changes. Maybe the width of the base of the wheels and all that, and the suspension, shrink it back to where it was. Again, those are very expensive changes that NASCAR has to do that will take years to R&D, if they even do R&D, which like we saw last offseason, they were going to do the transaxle and it never took off, and we're still stuck with this car. So who knows how long we're stuck with this, unless Goodyear once again bails out NASCAR.
Interesting. Well, you're talking about expensive things, and that may be one of them, but another could be us betting this weekend and the money we make from Kansas. So I really appreciate the tire talk there and a good Bristol recap that it was last weekend. But now we move forward. We move ahead to one of the best races and one of the best racetracks right now on the schedule, as you mentioned earlier as well. It being an intermediate style of racetrack really suits what these cars, we go from a track, short track package and everything like that, which these cars have kind of struggled with, to now where they succeed and excel. And I am super excited for Kansas. With this being such a fast track, Wyatt, some of the tracks that I've looked at to kind of compare to gather data from in this one would be Michigan and also Las Vegas. I've also seen Darlington as well, with some of the stats in terms of running the high line and everything like that, in terms of who's good there, because we know that's where you can get the most speed coming off of corner exit, going into it as well. Drivers like Larson, Hamlin, Reddick, we see excel at these type of racetracks when they do provide that option for them up there in the upper groove. Wyatt, for you, when we take a look at Kansas, is there some sort of data or prep that you use this week to really get locked in for this one?
The main thing I use specifically is either obviously the last race we went to, the year prior race that happened, and more or less not necessarily the finish, because granted, that finish was green, white checkered, triggered by the late race caution by Chris Buescher. So take that with a grain of salt. But remember the running order prior to that caution. And I mean, also, and thirdly, it's just been a Toyota dominated track. I mean, again, you mentioned Michigan. Tyler Reddick won there. Tyler Reddick won here in 2023. Tyler Reddick's looked really good here. Denny Hamlin practically has almost owned the place. The only denominator, and the books are on this with us too, is Kyle Larson. He's been up there. He's won multiple races here. Obviously, the 1/1000th of a second finish was kind of bailed out by the green white checker. To be completely fair, once again, rest in peace, Martin Truex Jr. fans throughout the 2024 Cup Series season. But Kyle Larson's always going to be up here. But you look at a guy like Chris Buescher again, like you cannot. And RFK Racing, to be fair, too. Brad Keselowski ran really good here last year in the fall. So you can't discount the Fords in RFK. It's really but Toyota's going to be the dominant car. You're going to see a lot of Toyotas flock up. So I look at Joe Gibbs Racing and I look at 2311 as big almost flavors. Big players for today, for this week.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, I definitely agree there, because like you said, Toyota's been so strong here at this track. I mean, when you look at the 45 car specifically, right? Kurt Busch wins, Bubba Wallace wins, Tyler Reddick wins. I mean, they just continue that. We didn't see them be as strong as I thought they would be in the spring. So that was a little concerning for me there. But with this specific race, I think, in the fall, this is the one that they've dominated. And then Denny's also won, like you said, a bunch of times here as well. So I also wanted to take a look at the finishing results from the spring race at Kansas earlier this season. I think the biggest thing to note, like you said, was the closest finish in NASCAR history. We saw 4 drivers, within a blanket, it looked like, coming down to the checkered flag there. Kyle Larson, Chris Buescher obviously won 2. Then we saw Chase Elliott in 3rd. And I think Chase Elliott is a driver we could potentially look out for in this one. We'll get to his odds in the next segment here and see if he may be worth taking a look at. But I do know for sure this is a track for him. He has won it before, and he keeps getting better, it seems like. I think him at Kansas could have a strong run this weekend. They haven't been, I feel like the 9 car and Chase Elliott haven't been dominant necessarily, but they've been consistent. And all you really need is a NASCAR overtime, double overtime, leaders wreck because they're racing hard, and a driver to be in the top 3 to 5. He could be that guy for us there. Obviously, Martin Truex Jr. 4th, like you mentioned, it looked like he had the win in the bag for Kansas before the late race caution, which was for Kyle Busch, who finished in 8th there. So Kyle Busch, hey, could we see him make a play in this one? We'll talk about that. Denny Hamlin 5th, Christopher Bell 6th, Alex Bowman 7th, and then a couple surprising guys, I would say. Noah Gragson 9th and Michael McDowell in 10th. That was definitely interesting to see that play out. I think for Gragson too, he started in 3rd. So to see that was capable of doing for him leads me to believe that Chase Briscoe might have a strong shot this weekend, because the way that they are operating, everything out of Stewart-Haas Racing is going into that 14 car. They are doing everything. They taking all the resources from the different teams. He just swapped pit crews with Josh Berry because they're better than Chase's current crew, or at least the former crew, that is. So to me, Wyatt, in terms of the 14 car, because I really want to talk about him or any other drivers around the playoff bubble. We see Austin Cindric, Suarez, Bowman, and Briscoe there underneath the cut line right now. Heading into Kansas, is there any driver that you may see be aggressive in the current playoff picture there?
Yeah, in the playoffs, I definitely see Briscoe probably relying on that setup that Gragson had, because just remember that part of the season, Gragson really came out at Las Vegas. Gragson really had a great race at Kansas during that springtime. That 10 team was really rolling. Now it's, again, you're right. You have to turn your focus to the 14 car and put all resources towards that. So putting the setup into that car, preparing that car for this race, for the next 3 races particularly. Again, look how good he was at Charlotte Roval when we get over there. Talladega, as long as you don't wreck. And granted, he wrecked at Atlanta, and he just had such a good run through the first round. Granted, again, Stewart-Haas pretty good at the short tracks or the Darlington style races. And you said Darlington yourself. Look at that. He won that race. So the 14 car on these on the bigger tracks, I've been kind of more shaky on the 14, but given the situation for that team, everything's going in that car. I expect him to be running at least top 10 the same way that Gragson was. I don't see him as a contender per se, at least for this race, just because there's so many. Again, got to beat the Toyotas, got to be Kyle Larson. Chase Elliott is a definitely good pick too to bet on. You got to beat 2311. So, and RFK, I think, is still ahead of them in terms of Kansas speed versus them. So they're going to be battling for probably a top 10. Stage points is going to be a big deal for them in this round with where they're starting. So they're going to be chippy and aggressive, getting up there through the field. Another one, really, Austin Cindric needs to be very aggressive. I really don't think, and he's listed at 100-1 for reasons. It's just he's very unreliable at intermediate tracks. Like, truthfully and honestly, he's going to have to rely on the other 2 races in these playoffs to do well. If he has a good run in qualifying, then expect him to be good. What I expect is him to be running probably outside the top 20, probably, or battling for the top 20. So
yeah. No, I think that's 100% true with Cindric and also Briscoe. Like, I think those 2 drivers I have my eye on in this particular round. When we look at, obviously, Kansas, if they can go and get either one of them, if they can get a top 10 to a top 20, that could be enough to then put them in a good position to have strong runs at Talladega and the Roval, where those 2 drivers, at least, I mean, I'd say Briscoe is a little bit better on all type of racetracks rather than Cindric right now in his career. But still, I mean, when we look at Cindric, he's a 1 to 2 trick pony these days in terms of super speedway racer and road course racing. Well, those 2
flat oval too. I'll give him a flat oval as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Gateway winner there. Yeah.
The surprise one at Gateway. So to me, I think this round could be big for both of those drivers to capitalize on having those tracks that fit their at least driving style, or at least being able to capitalize on these tracks where they've been good at before, being able to lead laps at super speedways or the road courses as well. So those are 2 guys that they may not, like you said, they may not be contenders for the win, but I definitely have my eye on them to be aggressive, to get a strong run, to have a good finish, because if they do that and wrecks happen and certain drivers have issues, they can once again just move on to the next round and advance by having clean races and strong runs. So I think that's a great time now to move to the odds breakdown, because we talked about the playoffs, talked about the playoff picture, talked about the drivers that were strong at Kansas before, but what are the sports books saying? who is going to be our favorites in this one? Well, it's none other than Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin. That is to be expected. But by how much? Well, Larson's plus 400 and Denny is plus 550. Both of those odds, I'll say it right now, I can't touch either of them until after practice and qualifying. We look at the top 5 who finished inside the top 5 at Kansas last time, and their starting positions there. Larson started 4th, Buescher 12th, Elliott 9th, Truex 13th, and Hamlin 14th. So to me, I see the potential for these values at plus 400 to plus 500 to be bumped up a little bit. Maybe we can get them in the 6-1, 7-1 range if we're lucky. And we saw that in the opposite fashion with Larson last week as he opened the week early at plus 650. I told everyone who was tuning into the show, bet on that right now, because after practicing qualifying, it would go down. He did so. He was plus 300 prior to the race and then ultimately dominated the race and won. So to me, I think in terms of the value with these favorites, I would wait on them. I would also say I will have both of those drivers, at least one of them, on my card to win this race. But I just don't think in terms of the odds, it's worth it to bet on them midweek. Wyatt, do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I'm not touching him unless I need to. And only one is probably going to get picked up. I'll reveal that in a little bit. But Larson and Hamlin are just astronomically above the field, and the books are absolutely right on this one for how dominant they've been for the last 5 years, really. Like Kyle Larson has won here the last, I think, 2-3 times, something like that, since 2021. Denny Hamlin has been competing for wins here and has won, I believe, twice in the last 5 years. Off the top of my head, I could be wrong, but it's just astronomical, too astronomical for me to go both, because I want to allocate my units to more profitable, to better numbers that I see that I really, really, really like that could absolutely hit. So Larson and Hamlin, yeah, they're going to be up there. We know that. The books know that, and it's going to be small. It's going to be small all weekend. I even think despite the qualifying, because of that, because of what we just said, like they're going to race their way up there because you can. Here's the thing.
You can pass.
At Bristol, you can't pass. At Kansas, you can pass. And you can pass very, very skillfully, riding the ball, getting someone loose. And it's going to be awesome racing if they do start at the back. If they do start at the front, I mean, who knows? It just depends on how the race goes, but they will be up front if they don't wreck out.
I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen. Like you mentioned, you can pass at Kansas. And not only that, but it is a very skill-based track in terms of being able to see the drivers take control of their cars. With short track racing lately in this new, Gen 7 car, we've seen all the cars are the same, so it's hard for certain drivers to get position. Once the race starts, how are you going to pass guys if everyone's setups are exactly the same? It's going to take a lot more effort out of them. Well, when we get to this racetrack, if some drivers are better at running the high line or finding the best different grooves on the racetrack to get the most speed, they will perform better. And I think we saw that exactly happen. The top 7 in this race, or even the top 10, I think in the spring really were those drivers that performed the best throughout the day. I honestly would say that because of how they were able to continuously get better throughout the race. I think I'm super glad that you said, there's some other values out there that you really, really like, because one of the drivers to me is Tyler Reddick, plus 850. That value for him is awesome right now. I think that would be similar to what we saw last week with Kyle Larson at plus 650. To me, Tyler Reddick at plus 850 would be a number I would take right now, middle of the week, whenever you guys are watching this show or listening in, because I can see Tyler Reddick going out, having it like you said, he won at Michigan. He was really strong at Vegas, another comparable track. And I think when we see Kansas in the playoffs now, especially with 2311 racing, he could go out and have a strong run here. And I think with that being the case, he can be fastest in practice, maybe go out and get the pole, and we'll see this plus 850 probably go down, I'd say 5-1, 6-1, maybe if we're lucky. So I would just get that now because I know it's like, Reddick is going to be fast here. Moving on from him, we see Christopher Bell 13-1, Chase Elliott 13-1, William Byron with the same value, Blaney at 15-1, and Martin Truex Jr. 16-1. Why, out of those options there, for a little bit more higher values there for some drivers that are definitely capable of winning this one, who would you say has the best odds there for you looking at those type of drivers?
My head immediately goes to Christopher Bell. Won the pole here last time we were here, which is pole on Bet Rivers like plus 350, which is astronomical too. So the fact that his number drops all the way down to 13-1, I think that's a no-brainer. It's Bell season when it comes to playoffs, and he just shows up and has a very consistent run, which is ironically like different to when it's the regular season, and he goes straight for the win. Once he's obviously locked in when he has like a dominant run at Phoenix like that. So Bell's another very clinical driver, very similar to Kyle Larson. If he has the car to do it, he'll be up there contending for wins. The Truex number 16-1, where is that at? For which book is that on?
So we're seeing Martin Truex Jr. That one is going to be on Caesars, 16-1 there for Truex. Yeah, as I am, that's a good point there. Be able to shop around everyone. I'm reading these odds from the Action Network so we can find the best odds and the best values out there. We see everyone else was FanDuel, but Truex specifically is from Caesars.
Most of my numbers are coming from FanDuel too. 16-1, absolute dynamo number for him there. The thing is that again, are we going to ride the wave of pain any farther?
No, I can't trust it. I can't
exactly.
Take it.
Look at it.
Do it to us all the time.
Look at his top 3. Look at his top 5 number. I mean, he still finished top 5 here, regardless of that finish in overtime. So, I mean, I expect him to be a top 5 contender. So that'll be coming up later on. I'll look at that number. Chase Elliott is one I look at. And I draw a lot of inspiration here from his Texas win earlier in the season. I love the 13-1 number on him. I'm looking at that very closely in my evaluations here. Ty Gibbs at 20-1. It's a Gibbs car. It's 20-1, and I believe he won stage 1 here in the spring, if I'm not mistaken.
He finished in 6th in stage 1 and 6th in stage 2 as well. So a top 5 car, top 6 car. Yeah.
A top 5 car. Okay. He's up again. He's going to be up there because of Joe Gibbs being good here at Kansas. Bubba Wallace 24-1. I look at too. It's just another 2311 car, former winner here in 2020 in the 2022 race.
Let me ask you a question about another guy that while we're talking about him, because he's right after Bubba Wallace in terms of the odds. That's Kyle Busch, 25-1, another former winner at this racetrack recently, that is. Kyle Busch also, I would say, this was a race in Kansas where Kyle Busch looked like he can actually go out and win. Like he was leading laps at Kansas. It wasn't a type of race where he, was trying to get lucky or was playing strategy. Like, no, that car was just, and him, they were just good. And it makes sense, right? Because it's a skill-based racetrack, and Kyle Busch is one of the best to ever do it. 25-1 for KB. Is that something you'd be willing to take in this one?
Again, only because of how he handled the Darlington Southern 500 race. Like, that's another one to draw a comparison on, and just how good RCR has kind of been coming out the last few weeks. Although they've kind of stalled. It's been, he wrecked at Watkins Glen, obviously wasn't in contention at all there. The round one, none of the round 1 races, he was really there, but still, RCR is kind of still on that. You probably still is an easy bet to maybe say top 5, maybe top 10. Top 10 for sure is what I'd be looking at Kyle Busch for and his number, but 25-1, maybe a little sprinkle is what I consider at best. My last guy I was going to go to was Chris Buescher, though. I mean, again, 1/1000th of a second. RFK, it's just been so good here. And it correlates with also Brett Keselowski, 25-1 as well. You just got to look at those two guys and kind of definitely consider those two because of how good the team has ran here at Kansas consistently. Kyle Busch, though, is just, that's kind of more hopeful in my eyes.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. And I think to that point too of Kyle Busch and some of the other drivers in this one, I think it'll be the playoff guys rising to the front. At least that's what I expect to see, especially with Denny Hamlin in the last round, riding around in Atlanta, trying to play things safe. And he almost paid the price for that and potentially getting eliminated in the first round, which that's something we did not expect. We did not expect to be talking about Denny Hamlin surviving the round of one. So because of that, not only do I expect Hamlin to be aggressive, but all of the playoff drivers, with it now being 12 of them, I expect all of them to just be trying to be up front the best they can there and racing, because it's silly to say kind of, but at Watkins Glen, they didn't race for the win. And Denny and a couple of other guys at Atlanta just rode around at the back, and it cost them. A couple of other drivers in terms of those playoff guys that I want to mention in this one: Joey Logano 28-1, Bowman 33-1, Briscoe 50-1. I like that number. I think that's fair value, but to the point that we mentioned earlier, maybe not a contender for the win unless there's some late race shenanigans or something like that. His teammate, not a playoff driver, but have to mention it, Noah Gragson, who started in third and finished ninth, 90-1. So if you guys want to throw a little sprinkle, throw a little dart there, a little long shot, that would be my play for a long shot. Daniel Suarez 100-1, Austin Cindric 150-1, and that would sort of round out our odds breakdown for those playoff drivers and the other drivers that could potentially have a strong run in this one. And now it's time. The moment everyone has been waiting for. Kansas Speedway in the NASCAR playoffs. We talked about who's going to be fast. We talked about why. We talked about the playoffs. Now let's talk about who's going to win. Wyatt, you up first, our guest in this one. Who do you think comes away with the win at Kansas this weekend?
First of all, one of the two favorites I will pick, it's got to be Denny Hamlin, right? Mm-hmm. It just seems like it's going to be a bounce back type of race. Kansas has been one of those bounce back tracks for him over the years for him. Again, Toyota's just so tough to bet against at this track. I want to see that 5-1 improve though before I pull the trigger there, obviously. But if I had to pull the trigger, I would pull the 5-1. Right below him again, we mentioned him, and I love betting him too. He's won me on both times I'd bet him. I'm going with Tyler Reddick. I was there last year, got to cover that, see that incredible finish in overtime. That 45 car is tough to beat at that track. He's going to stay up in the top, and he's just going to lurk. Maybe he'll lead it to the end. Maybe he'll be third in another overtime, and he just takes over on the right strategy call. So we'll see with that. But 8.5-1 is a number I cannot ignore. It's going to only go lower from there. 8.5-1.
That now too, right? For exactly. The Reddick specifically, yeah.
I'm on the same page as you with the 8.5-1. He's only going lower, and it's mainly because, again, Michigan, Kansas last year, cannot deny him. Thirdly, I'll go with Chase Elliott. We mentioned him earlier, 13-1. Again, I said Texas winner, a similar 1.5 mile track. Finished there in third in that pack coming to the line. The Hendrick cars are the yin to the Joe Gibbs yang. They're going to be up there battling for the win. And I really want to go into these 20s, but my mind and my heart cannot get away from this Christopher Bell 13-1 number. It's only going to go. That one's definitely only going to go up because he is going to qualify in the top 5 at least. I mean, again, 3.5-1 for the poll on Bet Rivers is just a ludicrous number. That's almost a guarantee he's going to be front row. If it's not him or Kyle Larson or Denny Hamlin, those three, or even Tyler Reddick, give him that credit too. But Bell at 13-1, he turns it up in the playoffs, and it's going to be a battle of the favorites. I feel of those, and 13-1 again. It's just a number that. Honestly, it's not even a favorite number. That's a value number, straight value. Got to take that. And if I had to go to the 5th, I'd probably I got to get away from the Toyotas. I'll go Chris Buescher. Give him some love. 20-1. It could go down, but 20-1 Chris Buescher isn't bad at all. Give him some love.
I like that a lot. And honestly, Wyatt, I mean, I I don't even think I have to say anything now for this because you took all my picks.
We have the Vulcan mind meld going, bud.
We are locked in. Same exact page for Christopher Bell, rather. Christopher Bell is one driver that I wanted to mention and highlight because of what you just said. 13-1. I think out of all of the drivers in the field, even better than Tyler Reddick, I think Christopher Bell's closing line value will be better than all of the drivers in the field. 3 poles in the last 5 races. We got Wyatt screen going crazy because of Christopher Bell. That's got to be a sign. That was wild. And he's still purpled out there.
I'm purple now. What are we doing now?
But I think it's got to be a sign. Christopher Bell, he's taking over. He's taking over our screens here. He's
taking over He's taking over the stream over here. What are we doing now?
He hacked the system. 3 poles in the last 5 races at this track, and he sits 13-1 right now. That value is only going to go down drastically. I see that number getting cut in half because of him qualifying well once again in this race. And like Wyatt mentioned earlier, come playoff time, it is always
where
Bell shines.
We're back.
It's clear. It's crystal clear for Christopher Bell there. Also agree with out of the favorites. If I had to choose one between Larson and Hamlin, it would be Denny Hamlin, like you mentioned. If I had to choose another driver, Toyota, it would be Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell as well, and then Chase Elliott, 13-1. Like every pick that you've said, I am on. We are exactly locked in terms of our plays for this one this weekend. If I had to go with another driver, sort of for a long shot play, just to sort of diversify the card here, it would be someone along the lines of, I kind of like a Joey Logano 28-1, but I don't expect him to be a huge player in this race. I think it's hard to sort of judge off of their spring because the 22 was not really fast for a good portion of this season. I think he got lucky with the win in Nashville and then was able to turn things on come playoff time now. But with that being said, that's something I want to remember. When Joey Logano's in the playoffs, he is one of the best drivers in the field. So regardless of how the car is, he's just always able to sort of find his way towards victory lane or at least towards the front of the field. Vegas is a track he's been strong at. Kansas hasn't really been one. Let's see where he finished in the spring here. Wasn't a good race for him. Might have got involved in an accident. Yeah, had to have been because he finished in 34th. So if you're looking for a rebound, Joey Logano 28-1 could be a potential play there. Also love Bubba Wallace 24-1. I feel like maybe not for the win because I feel like if it's him against Denny Hamlin, against Tyler Reddick at the end, the 23 may let one of those drivers go through because of the fact that their Toyota teammates needing to advance to the next round. But I do expect the 23 car to be racing up front with those guys for the win. But buddy, I mean, hey, we are absolutely synced up. I love the picks there. And I think we're on the same page about everything. Another one I wanted to go with was Ryan Blaney, but looking at his finishes at this racetrack, I don't see it because he hasn't done anything at Kansas specifically where he's proven to me that he could be a top contender with these other drivers that we mentioned there.
I completely agree with the Ryan Blaney logic there. It just doesn't strike my mind when Ryan Blaney was good here before the Xfinity series long ago. And Bubba's the one I was like, man, either Buescher or Wallace. I just had to diversify and get Buescher in there and get a Ford in there, which is exactly what you're thinking with Joey Logano, which I do completely respect. Hey, this race could go to 5 overtimes and he wins again. You never know. So nobody suspects Joey Logano these days, unless it's Atlanta Motor Speed. Unless it's Atlanta. Unless it's Atlanta or Talladega coming up, probably. But yeah.
Exactly. And with the number being that high for a driver of Joey's caliber, that's the only reason I would say give him a look. But everything else, our plays are locked and loaded there, which means prompt bets. Let's see if we're continuing to be on the same page. One that I'll give out first, and then we'll let you fire away, is Tyler Reddick, because Tyler Reddick could be plus 100 on BetMGM and plus 120 on Bet Rivers for even better value there. To me, we talked about how much we love for him to win this race, but if he doesn't, you know he's going to finish inside the top 5, or at least I'd like to believe that. So to get plus money early in the week to do so before practicing qualifying, get that number now. Bet that driver now, because even after he qualifies, let's say back end of the top 10 or even outside of it, I still think the amount of people that will be betting this play will just bring the value down and bring the line down there. Wyatt, I see you're happy. Do you also have Tyler Reddick for top 5 in this one?
We almost got all the way there. I'm on top 3 again. And that's the same play I said when we went to Michigan. It's plus 240 on FanDuel. And shop everywhere else. I'm sure you can find a better number somewhere else, but 240, the very nice, very elegant number for him to get the top 3, then, which is crazy because Christopher Bell below him is at plus 370. And again, we said 13-1. And he's tied for fourth with what? With Byron, with Elliott, with a bunch of other drivers up there for just the win. So again, I'm going full blown Tyler Reddick with the top 3. I do like the plus 120 side of a top 5, but again, my units don't want to get them too haywire, so I go down to the top 10. Was one of my favorite plays. We were talking about Chase Briscoe earlier. I believe he's plus 180 on FanDuel for a top 10. That's what I'm looking for that. Noah Grax and his teammates at a plus 390. I do like that as well, just because of the trend between both of those guys. I like Alex Bowman at a plus 120. He's been very consistent at really any racetrack, really, and he's going to turn it up in the playoffs. I think he's going to do well. Logano's about even. He's minus 105.
Bowman scored the most points in the first round out of all playoff drivers, to your point there. So
exactly.
It may not seem Bowman is that hot per se, but he is. That's just the fact of the matter. He is being consistent throughout this playoffs thus far. I want to list out 2 drivers for a top 5 and see which one you like the most. Bubba Wallace is plus 325 best odds via Bet Rivers, and Kyle Busch is plus 350 via BetMGM. Which driver would you take for a top 5 in this one?
Either. I'm probably going to go with Bubba Wallace off the rip just because, again, former winner. He's just had the momentum. He's 23-11, has won this race since 2022, I believe. Yep, they are the back-to-back former winners here. So I don't see how Bubba. And remember, I will remember last year Bubba was running super well here, and then blew the tire while leading. So that's something else to consider for the 23-11 camp and this race. It's just, and I'll backtrack. I'll even take him for the win after remembering that little nugget there, because it's just, you can't bet against this team. They've been so hot at this particular race that they're going to compete and they're going to succeed. Yeah, give me Bubba Wallace top 5 all day for plus, you said 320 or 350, one of the two.
So plus 325 on Bet Rivers, and then on BetMGM, more of the bigger books out there for most people is plus 240 for Bubba Wallace top 5. I also, to your point, agree that they're going to continue to be strong in this racetrack. I think one thing that plays into their favor, which may be weird to say, but the fact that they didn't have a strong race in the spring, I think that will help them sort of rebound, see where they missed the mark there, and come back with the car and the setup that they had in this type of race. With it being, I think they've been better in the fall Kansas race than the spring over the last 6 years now, and because of that, or 3 years rather, since it is 23-11. But I think that is a big fact heading into this one, because not only do they have something to sort of rebound from, but they have a good consistent setup and data to look forward to at this exact race, being Kansas in the playoffs, being Kansas in the fall here. Why, any more prop bets you're looking at in this one?
I'll go down the list again on my top 10. Carson Hocevar is a 550. I think it's just that team specifically has had a good run. Top 10 earlier in the year at Texas is my thinking process. And again, just how hot they've been. I mean, we saw it. I wish at Bristol I could have said Ryan Preece. I'm not going to say that this time around. He's 750. Gonna throw his number out there. Eric Jones, he did get a top 10 off the strategy last year, also at a 750. We even have to mention Zane Smith. He's had a couple good races. He got the top 5 even at Watkins Glen, plus 800 for him. Shout out to him.
To that point, sticking with Spire, I got to cut you off for Justin Haley. Justin Haley back in the Spire car after the trade with Corey LaJoie, which is something we rarely see in the sport of NASCAR trades. The fact that they did that and then hyped it up to be that, I absolutely love. And I love Justin Haley plus 800 on BetMGM for a top 10 in this one.
Ooh.
He's done it multiple times this season in Rick Ware racing equipment, having strong runs, being there at the end and finishing inside the top 10. Now he's in better equipment. Hendrick Motorsports, car, not car, but car that is alliance with the Spire guys there, little parts maybe thrown his way. Justin Haley plus 800. You mentioned Hocevar, you mentioned Zane Smith. Well, I think Justin Haley plus 800 is my favorite out of those Spire guys there. Another driver I wanted to throw out there because he finished inside the top 10 in the spring was Michael McDowell. He's plus 420 on FanDuel. Decent odds there for McD. I feel like that's another driver to kind of keep an eye on. I'd probably wait until after practicing qualifying, as although he did start in 8th earlier this season, so it really all depends. They also have been strong at qualifying for those front row drivers there. Now, it's time to give our favorite plays. Wrapping everything up here in this one. It's been a great show with you, Wyatt. We talked about so many different things, and I feel super locked in for Kansas here to get back into victory lane. For you, out of everything we talked about, or something that we may not have mentioned yet, what would be your favorite play?
My top 3 here. It's going to go back to Christopher Bell at the 1,300 number. As we said, got to qualify really well here. It's going to start up front. That number is going to dip. It's not going to get better. So get the number now while you can. 2, and you've convinced, and after further review, I'm going to say Bubba Wallace 2,400. It's just, this is 2311's track, and that number for a former winner with the same team running really well here last year. They're going to have the same setup here. As long as they don't have a flat tire like they did last year, expect Bubba Wallace to be up front competing for the win. At a 2,400 number, you can't argue with that. That's so great. And my 3rd number, we're going back to the Xfinity Series. Loved seeing these numbers here. I like a Brandon Jones at 1,400. Has run really well here. He's been really good at Kansas. I believe a former winner here with Joe Gibbs, and and finished top 3. Which, by the way, top 3 for him is a plus 400. He finished top 3 last year and had a good run. I don't believe John Hunter Nemechek is in this race, so expect him to compete. And I also like Riley Herbst's same number at 14-1. He's been really good on the mile and a half. Stewart-Haas Racing's been really good. I think Riley Herbst, especially with the news and the talks this week with him, needs a rebound type of race going into this playoffs. Starting with the win would put him back in really good conversations going into 2025. Give me Riley Herbst at a 1,400.
Awesome. Some Xfinity Series action. We have it all here in Through the Gears. For me, I got 2 of my favorite plays. I'll list off now. Christopher Bell at plus 170 for a top 5 on Bet Rivers. I think that is a great number for a driver that I believe will go out and potentially win the pole. It could be his 4th pole in the last 6 races at Kansas specifically. If it's not him winning the race, I like a top 5 at plus 170. You can also get it plus 120 on BetMGM. And for outright winner right now, Tyler Reddick at plus 850. That number is great when you look at the closing line value that will come with it, and keep that in mind for him. I think a lot of people may forget how strong he has been at this racetrack. Overtime last year, and he went from 7th to 1st to win that race. I thought that was awesome to see him being able to climb through the field there and get the win that he deserved to get at Kansas in this race last season. So Tyler Reddick at plus 850 would be my favorite play, and he's also the outright winner that I like the most in this one. So Wyatt, thanks so much again for coming on the show. Where can people find you at and watch and see all of your great content and coverage from everything you do for yourself and Front Stretch so far this season?
So you'll find me at Wyatt W Racing on Twitter. Scrolling down there on the bottom feed as well. Wyatt _GameTime_Watson on Instagram. Be sure to check out every everything on Front Stretch that we do. Catch everything on social media. I'm normally the hands behind all of that. So for some of that content. So be sure to subscribe. Be sure to catch all the Kansas content. And for y'all, hopefully y'all make some money. Tino, I really hope you make some money with all the with the Vulcan mind meld picks today. And I feel real good going into this weekend. And so should you.
Yes, sir. Hey, if I'm making money, you're making money. So let's get to it. Looking forward to Kansas. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks so much again for Wyatt to coming on the program. Really appreciate everything he does for Front Stretch, and it's always so great to see him and talk it up. And I love that the fact that all of our bets are synced up. We had the same ideas and the same drivers, and I hope you guys do too. And whether or not you do or don't, I hope you win some money this weekend at Kansas. Be sure to follow Wyatt at Wyatt W Racing there as well. You can follow me at Tino PATTIGNO for more content for NASCAR betting and everything else in between as we get set for this weekend's racing action. I'll be keeping you guys updated with the betting card and everything like that. And be sure to stick around for the Stock Car Scoop, which comes out after every race, after every weekend. Tune in to hear what the guys have to say about everything that unfolded for the NASCAR playoff racing action from Kansas in this one. I'm super excited for it. Let me know who you think is going to win the race down in the comments below. Be sure to leave a like, and I'll see you guys next week as we go through the gears.